Hi, this is Ed Parcaut, your host of Inner Edison. I'm here today with Tucker Max, and that's of Scribe Media, correct?
Yes.
Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. I met you, I don't know, 2 weeks ago. Has it been that long already? In Arizona at Steve Sims Speakeasy. And we sat down, talked about what you do. And for most people, I've talked to a lot of people that I've interviewed and they know who you are, but I don't think my listeners would know who you are. So do you want to explain your background? I'd like to really know how you got in. So most people don't realize Scribe Media helps you write books.
Right.
But the background, how did you decide this is what you wanted to do? Right. Because that seems like a hard story for me to understand, helping people write books, because I hate to write my first, So.
Yeah. Well, so I'm a big believer that you shouldn't teach something unless you're good at it, right? Or you really know how to do it. And so I actually started as a writer. I wrote 4 New York Times bestsellers that sold like 4 or 5 million copies. The big one that a lot of your listeners probably know is called "I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell." That was on the New York Times list for like 5 years. There was a movie made about it, all this kind of stuff.
Wow.
And so I was, an established author. And the question you get when you're an author, there's always 2 questions. The first one is, what's your book about? And then sometimes people listen, sometimes they don't. But everyone really wants to ask the second question. I've always wanted to write a book. Tell me how you did it. Right? Because everyone wants to write a book. And so for years, I would actually explain the process to people. And it's hard. And the way I would explain it was basically boiled down to become a writer. And I guess that's one way to write a book, but it's not really a very efficient way. Imagine if I was like, hey, I want to build a custom house. How do I do that? Imagine if a home builder was like, learn construction, right? Wouldn't that be a horrible answer? No, that's not the right answer. And so eventually this woman at an Entreprenuer event called me out, and she's like, because I was lecturing her about she's like, I've got this great book in me. Everyone's asking me to write it for 10 years. I don't have the time. I have a family. I run a company. How do I get this book out of my head without having to do all this? And I was like, are you asking me how to write a book without writing it? And she's like, yeah. And so I started lecturing her about hard work. Right. This is a woman who has kids and runs a huge business in the same. And I, like an idiot, I'm lecturing her. And she rolls her eyes at her head at me. And she's like, this is an entrepreneur dinner. Are you an entrepreneur? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And she's like, I don't know, because a real entrepreneur would help me solve my problem, and they wouldn't lecture me about hard work. And I was like, because she was right. And so then I got obsessed with this idea of how do I help regular people who don't want to be writers but have books in them get their book out of them, right? And then it dawned on me 3 months later, because I'm slow, that this is a solved problem. Scribes have been doing this for 2,000 years, right? Plato wrote down all of Socrates' words. St. Paul wrote down all of Jesus's words. Alex Haley wrote Malcolm X's words. Go on the list. And it's I just create a process, a really simple, easy to use process where we can do this. And so I helped her create her book, kind of as a project to see, would this work if I interview her and she doesn't write any of it, but it's all her words and her voice. Because books about retail or something I wasn't going to learn anything about, right? So it wasn't ghostwriting. It was it's got to be totally her knowledge and her ideas. And we tried it and it worked great. And this is how dumb I am. This is hilarious. We finished the book, right? And I help her publish it. I get everything done because, I know how to do all this stuff. And she's like, this is so great. I forget what I charged her, because I didn't even care what I made from it, because I was so embarrassed about what a douche I was, that the thing for me was getting the book done, not the money. And she's like, what should I tell my friends that you charge? And I was like, charge for what? She's like, for this service. And I'm like, oh, no. This is not, I don't do this as a service. And she's like, okay, well, what about my friends who want to do this? And I'm like, I don't know. Why would you tell me? And she's like, all right, well, I'm going to send people to you. You can tell them what you're going to charge. And then she started referring people to me. And I was like, I was just so confused by this idea that I would do this as a service. I had a friend of mine. He was basically an assistant sort of at the time. And I'm like, hey man, do you want to write books for people for money? And he was a good writer. And he's like, yeah, of course. I'm like, cool. They're going to pay me whatever, 20 grand, and we can just split it. And I'll tell you everything to do. And he's like, oh, done. And so he comes back 2 months later and he's like, So we've signed $250,000 worth of revenue. Like, this is a company, dude. Do you want to actually do this? And I'm like, oh, a company. I hadn't even thought about that. That was like 6 years ago. And now we've passed like 50 million in revenue, and we have like 65 full-time, 200 plus part-time or freelance. And we've done like 750 books that are out. We have another 1,000 plus in process. Some of them, like David Goggins' book, have been massive, huge hits. We did Steve Sims' book, like you said, or we helped him with his. And so, like, we basically created a process where people can easily follow it and write their book and get it out without having to learn how to be a writer or go through all that awful pain. Yeah.
So you pretty much did you pretty much did my show. So we're done. All right. Talk to you later.
There you go.
You've told all the way from here to here and issues along the way. So, but I mean, the whole process, because I wanted to write a book, but I didn't know I wanted to write a book, right? I didn't realize. I got on radio and they were like, you're authority now because you're on radio and people think you know what you're talking about. And now they're like, the next step would be to do a book. And I'm like, yes. A book, right? And so, and then talking to multiple people I've had on the show or whatever, it's like the process is different for everybody. And then there's different levels of people who are writing books.
Yep.
Now, right.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a million ways to get books done, right? You can obviously write it yourself. You can hire a ghostwriter. Generally speaking, and ghostwriters work all kinds of different ways, but generally speaking, and this is not 100% true all the time, but most ghostwriters are like going to interview you a little bit, but they're basically going to go write a book, and then you're paying them to put your name on the book, right? Yeah. Our clients are like people who, like you, very successful. They know their stuff. They have a book in them, probably more than one book, and they want to get their book out of them, but it's got to be their ideas, their words, their voice, not some ghostwriter. But they don't want to have to, spend 2 hours a day at a computer, right? They want to spend 2 hours a week on the phone. And so we just created a really good process for that, and it works well. We also actually we have programs where people write it themselves with our coaching. We do that as well. We have a lot. That's probably a third of our business actually, is people writing it themselves, but with our people as coaches. That works really well too. Because for some people, man, it's like the hands on the keyboard are a very important aspect of it for them. But they still want to follow a process. They want to know they're doing it right. They want to have someone they can check in with. They want an expert. Just like if I'm like buying a house, like I need to talk to someone who knows what the hell they're doing, because I don't know what I'm doing, right? Right. I need an expert. It's no different.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I could see that now and how important this is in the process. Because one of the things I didn't want to do is have somebody else write my book, as like you said, a true ghostwriter. Because then there's people, what do you call them, translators or whatever, like right. Steve Sims. So you needed a translator to put it down on paper form. So basically, they interview you over. How long does the normal process take? If I wanted to start a book today and I paid you, I already know what that is. We're not going to tell anybody. What's that process look like? Is it a 6-month process? Is it?
It's generally for most people going to be about 7 to 9 months.
Okay.
That's from where you are today to a finished book out on the market. Some people take longer, a year, but that's just because they want to go slower. They want to spend more time thinking about stuff or editing, which is fine. It's no problem. But it's just 7 to 9 months is about normal.
Well, I would think that sometimes people get in the way of themselves, so they don't want to, they're perfectionists and they go, I want this, just this. And you just at one point have to let it go. And I'm finding that a lot with the stuff I'm doing, that videos, whatever, it doesn't matter. Just get it out there and shut up. Who cares? Right. It's going to be gone so fast. Nobody's going to remember. So.
Well, yes and no.
Well, right? I don't mean like do a bad job. I'm just saying you could go on for 2 years if you really wanted to make it too perfect, right? So,
exactly. Yeah. So you want to find the balance between this is really good and people are going to take a lot of value from it. You want to make sure you squeeze that as much as you can. But then when you start getting to the point to where I am making marginal changes, or I'm afraid, I'm pretending that I'm changing things because I'm afraid and I don't want to ship it, that's when you're ready to go. But yeah, for most people, I would say err on the side of releasing just a tad bit earlier than you think you might be ready, right? Like, so like if you're like, I just need this teeny bit more, if you said that 3 times, you probably don't need any more.
Gotcha. Yeah. So through this process, you've done multiple books. I didn't realize you did David Goggins, which was I just finished his. I did the podcast when I was running. And
Isn't his audiobook amazing?
yeah, it
It's
really is.
that's
Yeah.
incredible, man. It was his idea actually to have we set him up with the writer, publishing, marketing. We did everything for his book, and so like he had the writer read the chapter, and then the writer would interview him at the end of every chapter. And so it's like, because David's dyslexic, so reading's very difficult for him, and so the writer, it's like this like nasally white guy, like doesn't sound like a toughest man in the world, and then he interviews the toughest man alive at the end, and it's Goggins. And it's so cool. It works amazingly well.
And then I saw him on Instagram, and he was saying he has another book coming out. Is that working? Okay.
Yeah, it's with us. Yeah, it's called Stay Hard.
He better trademark all that stuff.
Yeah, I hope I didn't.
Already.
I hope he's announced that. I hope I didn't ruin that for him.
Well, I can hold this off for as long as you need.
No,
so don't worry about it. Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like he doesn't say that all the time. Not on his shirt.
That's one of his
not
phrases.
On everything. Not on everything he publishes or anything, right? Go to his website. It's on the shirts. It's everything. But it's amazing that people have these stories in them, and you don't realize those stories and how they go through until somebody gets it out of them, gets it on paper, and people read them or you listen to them. And that's, for me, that's, I've always only went to books when I wanted to learn how to do something, right? Right. So for me, David Goggins was a totally different book for me, because I don't normally go to those books. I go, how do I need to do this? And I go and find that book. Right.
Yeah. So David, it's less a to-do and more of a memoir, but it's such an incredible story. Memoirs are great too. They're both, I think everyone on earth should write a memoir at some point in their life and tell their whole story. I think that should just be a rite of passage, a thing you do. Whereas like what you're talking about writing is more of an instructional book, a nonfiction, straight nonfiction, where you're going to teach your knowledge to people. Those are incredibly valuable too. They're just different types of books.
Right. No, I totally understand. It just, I was just talking about what I normally read, right? Yeah. Or I should say listen to, because, I hate reading. I fall asleep when I read.
Dude, listen, I'll tell you right now, man, there are a lot. I would say across all of our authors, the ones who do audiobooks, that are selling anywhere from 40 to 60% of their books on audio. So you're not in the minority. David's books, David sells 58% of his books are audio.
Wow.
That's crazy. And that beats ebook and physical combined is 40%.
I totally get that. That's huge.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? So you're actually in the majority with Goggins, with his audience. Yeah, for real.
Well, and that's amazing that, I only ordered his books so he'd sign it. And so I'd had a copy of it. Right? Yeah. But the actual Audible is just, when you're listening to it, you're like, wow, because you're right. Having that guy read the stuff and then they talk about it afterwards, and you just got to realize it's not like a 6-hour book. It's a 9-hour plus book, right, that you're listening to. So you got to spend a lot of time. I don't want to get
gripping though. Isn't it though? Yeah, it's amazing.
See, what you don't know, I was in the Navy, so I totally understand everything about what he went through. I didn't go to Buds. I was thinking about it, but then I'm like, I got a wife. I don't want to go. I know how it is with everybody.
It's also cold. It's so cold in that water, man. Come on, man.
Dude, I used to dive there in San Diego, so I know exactly, because that's where I lived for 18 years when I got in the service and stayed down there. And I used to dive out there in that darkness, and I'd have dry suits, and because like the wetsuits was just too cold. And so I totally understand how cold that water is. Some of the coldest Christmases are in San Diego. I know they say San Francisco, but I'm telling you, San Diego's is really cold. So anyway, but that's so. All right, so we talked about is there anything I'm missing on this? Because you do this all day long. I'm interviewing you.
I'll tell you, if your audience is interested, the best thing they can do is go to scribebookschool.com.
Oh, that's right. You have that. Right.
Yeah, we teach our entire process completely free. Like there's no catch to it or anything. It's everything. So everything you want to know about writing a book is there for free. You can obviously hire us like at our main site, but start at that site and look through it. Because if you're interested in writing a book, everything you need is right there, totally for free.
Right. And then what you're going to find out is, once you go through all that, you're going to say, hey, I want to hire you to do my book.
Yeah, this is hard. I'm going to get some help. Yeah.
Well, no, they understand the value of what you do. And I think that's the biggest thing that we have to, no matter what industry you are, when you're dealing with your clients, you have to put that value so they understand what you're getting out of it. Because most people have no idea the process until they sit down, they read all that, and they go through the videos and they say, wow, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm getting my money's worth, right?
It is.
So.
Yep, exactly.
All right. So now that's all your company. I know a little bit more because I was at Speakeasy. So you're not fully involved all the time. You're the chainsaw now, is what you called yourself the other day.
Yeah.
So let's look back a little bit, because a lot of times we want to bring up, things that have happened along the way that you were like, wow, this is my greatest accomplishment, that, this little mess up or whatever. I know the first one to get started in the company was a big one, because you're like, oh, I didn't even know I had a company, and then I'm making money, right? You signed up all these people for books.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm the accidental entrepreneur almost. Right. Yeah.
The perfect one. So along the way, is there anything that you're like, that made, that this thing happen and then it was this huge thing afterwards? Or has it just been an easy process building this company over the last 6 years?
Oh, good Lord, no. Oh, good Lord.
I know it wasn't, but I had to set that up.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, right. Of course. No. So I'll tell you what was easy, at least early on, was getting clients. Like, because everyone wants to write a book, and I was like pretty well known as an author. And so we got clients, a lot of clients fast. And so it was like a year or so, and we got up to like 1.5 million, 2 million in sales. And like, I thought we were doing great. And in one way we were, but then the wheels came off. Because I learned one of the hard lessons about business, I'm sure you know, starting a business, founding a business, being good at the business are totally different things than scaling a business, like growing it. Because growing a business means you have to be good at business. Starting it means you have to be good at writing books, right? Or whatever your field is, right? And so like, oh, dude, I had no idea how hard scaling a company was. No, because you know what it is.
I'm not laughing at you. I totally understand.
Same thing.
Right?
Because like, you know what it is? I'll tell you why. Because you meet people who work in big corporations, and so many of them are idiots. And so you're like, well, business must be easy because these people are stupid. But they didn't build the company. They're just functionaries who fill roles. The people who actually can scale companies, man, that is really hard. And so we ended up having to hire like a real CEO to run our company. And we got totally lucky, man. One of our clients was a badass CEO running a software company in Austin. And he was like kind of bored with it and looking for his next thing. And he hadn't founded the company. He just kind of came on to run it. And he loved what we were doing. He loved the process. And he's like, you guys have such a good product here, and you have no idea how to run your business. And we're like, yeah, we know. Why don't you come do it? And he was like, okay. And so he's become a complete rock star. His name's Javon McCormick. He's such a badass. And so now we're like, all the big numbers and everything we do is really because of him. Like, I mean, we had a great product. Like we had all the foundational elements you need to grow a great business. But he's the reason it grew without breaking or shattering. It's gotten better. Like, we're way better now at everything than we were when he came on like 5 years ago. And it's because of him and the team he brought on and he hired and all that stuff, dude. I wish, like, again, like the accidental entrepreneur and the lucky entrepreneur, right? Like I fell into this business, got it to the point where it's like, okay, I need a badass, found a badass. And now it's like, cool, I get to do podcasts and like go talk in places, and that's eat cheese, and that's it.
And get more business, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
If I'm talking to everybody. No, but that's the thing that happened, is the fact that you were a really good writer to start with, right? So you had the knowledge, you had that. It wasn't an accident. It just seemed like it. I know how that is, but basically you had all that knowledge, and the opportunity came at the right time for you. And that's what a lot of people say, you're lucky. No, it's luck is where opportunity meets preparation. Mm-hmm. And you were there. And then the next step was, okay, now how do I get out of the way of my company? How do I get out of the way of myself? Too many entrepreneurs are in their way all the time. They want to run it. It's like, if this is an example. Years ago, I'd go through this little drive-through here in town, and it was a little Mexican place, and you go through there, and the owner would get in the drive-through and talk to you, and you're like, okay, I'm pulling out of here to go somewhere else, because he would mess up your order all the time, but the people who actually worked there could do the order. So it's the same. I mean, that's just a quick thing, but it's the same thing. A lot of entrepreneurs are really good at starting a lot of companies, but then they don't know when to get out of the way. And
100%.
Yeah. Because I know you did Cameron's book, right?
Yes, we did 3 with him. We did Vivid Vision, Free PR, and Meeting Suck. Yeah,
Yeah,
Cameron
because I
Hero.
haven't had him on my podcast yet, but he was talking at the last event how, that he was doing a company and they said, hey, I'm sorry, but you're not the guy for us anymore because we need to scale it from here to here. And that's what you need to realize, where you're good at as an entrepreneur or where you're good at as a business person, to know where that, and just focus in that area and just go from there.
Yep.
And it's amazing that you learned that early on to get out of the way so you could grow your business as big as you have. And I know you're helping a little bit, but is there something else you're going to go do, or are you just going to take more time with the family? You do podcasts all the time? I mean, what's the future plan for you? I mean, because no offense, you're young, so you have a lot more in you. So
yeah. Well, basically, so me and the CEO, my co-founder, we own Scribe, just the three of us. Like, we didn't take any VC money, no investors, nothing. So we're both essentially building sort of like sister companies, right? Because both Zach and I are really good, my co-founder, really good at building new things. And he's building essentially a writing software backend that we're going to use with our writers and our authors. And then I think he's building it for us, but then we're eventually going to like turn that into a SaaS, I think.
okay.
And then I am building a traditional publisher. So like we're like essentially a professional self-publishing company, right? Because you pay us money and for a service, and then you own the rights and royalties to the book, which is the opposite of the traditional model, like Random House and Simon and Schuster and publishers like that. They give you in advance, and then they own the rights to the book, right? And so they're completely opposite business models. And so I couldn't build that under Scribe. But what I'm going to do is build a traditional publisher and use all the Scribe services. And so like that, I've already got the first 4 or 5 deals done. Those books will start coming out in the next 6 months to a year. And then I'll do the same thing. Like, Javon's going to be the CEO, my CEO of Scribe. He's going to be in charge, but we're going to hire like pretty high level people to run that. It won't take but 3 or 4 people to run the whole company. So it'll take me about a year and a half to build that. And then I'll probably be out of that and I'll go find the next thing I'm excited about that's in the same area, and I'll build that. And that's what Zach and I are basically going to do. We build new things, either new products within Scribe or new companies that are like orthogonal to Scribe, and then get them to a good point where they're ready to scale. And then Javon scales them.
So I want to go back to the difference between traditional publishing and who owns what and why you want to do either way. Right. Because I don't want to take it away, that you're building a traditional publishing company, but I don't think people understand that if you get a book deal, you don't own the book. You don't own that kind of stuff, right? So you want to explain
a book deal from
a
traditional publisher.
Correct.
Right. So there's 2 ways to write a book, right? Or to publish a book. There's a lot of ways to write a book. But if you want to publish a book, either you do it yourself, right? I guess there's really 3 ways. You do it yourself, or you go to, it used to be there were 2 ways. You self-published, right? Which meaning like you had to hire everyone you had to find a cover designer, hire that person. You had to figure out a way to, get it in bookstores and then put it on Amazon. You had to hire people to do all the tasks necessary to do a book, and then you put it out, right? That's self-publishing. And then traditional, meaning like the way it was for 100 years, you find an agent, a book agent, you convince them to represent you, you write a book proposal, and then the agent shops that proposal to like Simon and Schuster and Random House and Hachette and all the big publishers in New York. There really aren't that many. I think there's like 4 or 5 now. And then they shop them to them. If they want to buy it, you go pitch them. Then they'll give you in advance like $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000, and
that's
then
only. Hold on, can I stop right there? But that $100,000 is only if you're somebody that they know. If you're just an individual like myself writing a book, you're not going to get
advance at all, right? No, the odds you get a deal are extremely small. So the odds that an agent will rep you are very small. The odds that you'll get a deal are small. But like I'm saying, if everything goes perfectly, right, then you get a deal. And then they own the rights to the book, right? And they have their cover design. Really, they hire freelance cover designers, but like they have all their team. They put everything together. They get the book in bookstores, etc. They don't really do any marketing, and then they make the majority of the money. Like they make 85% of royalties. You take 15%. And that's kind of how it works, because the advance you get up front, the money up front, the $50,000 or $100,000, you don't have to pay that back, right? Until now, if your book sells a lot, then you make more. But if your book doesn't sell much, then you just don't get any more money, and that's kind of the end, right? And it used to be that it was really prestigious to get a traditional deal, but there's now our company, and there's a few others as well, are kind of in the middle. Like we do professional self-publishing. So you come to us and you hire us to do the sort of thing that a traditional publisher would do. The difference is you're paying us instead of getting paid, and you own the book and all the profits instead of royalties, instead of with traditional, you only get like 15%, right?
Right.
And so what we're finding is like, if you're a celebrity or someone with a huge audience, like a politician, it still makes a lot of sense to go traditional because you can get a deal, and you can usually get a pretty good deal. And it's like, I don't have to deal with anything. They'll hire the writer. We just go. But if you're like someone like you, like who owns a business, and you're using your book, not just as a book, normal book, but it also is helping you in your business, you probably want to own the book because you have a lot more leeway and flexibility in marketing. And so professional self-publishing is, you want the book to be good. It's got to look good. It's got to represent you well. But like the more you can do what you want in marketing, which you can't with traditional, because they only want you to sell the book. Whereas like Ed, like for example, you could give copies of your book away to potential clients, and you may not sell one copy, but you might make millions off the book because you got all kinds of clients from it, right?
Yeah.
And so like you couldn't do that with traditional, but with professional self-publishing, you can do that. That's why a lot of business people especially are doing that.
Plus, you don't own the stuff inside the book, right? You can't quote anything from the book.
Nope.
You can't
You can't
utilize
take any of that
anything
stuff
at
out
all.
of there. No,
Yeah, that's there. They own that. That's their copyright. They own everything. So you're basically giving up all your ideas and everything that your heart and soul to them to get a book out there to get more information, then do more publishing. But then some people have written books, right, themselves, self-publishing, and then they go to a traditional route to be, I guess, to get the quote unquote, I'm a true published author. Or, I mean, is that just...
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that, honestly, it used to be that self-publishing had a bad rap because most self-published books were bad. They had bad covers. They were just unprofessional. And so they were very low prestige, right? But like, I mean, look at David Goggins' book. Actually, weirdly, I have it right here in front of me.
I have it over there on the screen.
Right, this cover is as good as book covers get.
Right.
Like, it's an amazing book cover, right? And you look and feel this is better than most traditionally published books. And so, like, not one person has asked David, "Oh, who published your book?" Right? Because they look at the book and it's like, this is amazing. And so like it looks and feels like an amazing book, and that's all anyone cares about. And I can tell you David's numbers actually, because I know them and he's cool with me talking about them. He sold 2.6 million copies of his book. And if he had gone traditional, he got actually a $300,000 offer from HarperCollins to do his book. He turned it down to work with us. He paid us like, I don't know, 75 grand or something like that. Got like the full deluxe package, or 100 grand, something like that. And he's made with us. Now, he would have made with HarperCollins, he would have made about 6.5 million on 2.6 million books sold. He would have made about 6 million, right? He's made 22 million by going through us. Same sales, 22 million, more than 3.5 times what he made. So like David made a real good decision.
Well, I mean, the difference is the publishing company gives you, like you said, the money up front. They take all the risk, right? Where he actually goes, here's the money. I'm taking the risk. I get the reward. It's the same thing in business, right? Without a risk, you don't get a reward. And so you basically, how do you want to do this? Do you want to risk or do you not want to risk? And so, but like you said, I'm glad you brought up those numbers because you told me before, and I'm glad you had the book cover, because I asked you I had no idea that he was self-published. My wife did, because she saw it on one of his things. He talked about it. He self-published his book, and he was so happy he did that. So.
Yeah, it was only worth about 18 million for him, or whatever.
And then
16 million.
And that number you gave me, the 2.6, that included Audible, right? Or anything,
that's
right?
all book sales in all formats. Yeah.
Now on the book sales so you got the books, and then is there a difference on how much you make off of Audible and versus the other book? I mean, is it just a price point difference? I mean, do Audible take more money because it's Audible?
Yeah, so it varies widely. Most authors make more money on audio because Audible charges more, right? They charge, like, people will pay 26 books for an audiobook without thinking. Like, oh yeah, sure, that's great. And Audible splits are usually around, I think, 55-60%. So like David on a $25 book would be making $13, $14, right? Like straight to him.
Right.
Whereas like ebook, his ebook's probably $8.99, right? And so he's making 70% of that. So that would be like, whatever, $5.50 or $5.40, right? So it's like way less, a third almost, or 40% of what he makes. And then hardcover, if that's $25, I can tell you hardcover at scale these only cost about $2 a copy to print if you print a lot of them. If you don't print many, they're really expensive. But so if he's paying $2 and then plus all the other costs and blah blah blah, and then Amazon takes a huge cut on $25, I think he's making like maybe $8,
Okay.
right, per book sold. So it's like you're making 5.5, 8, or like 12. So you generally, this is not always true, that a lot of things book pricing is extremely complex at the margins, but generally speaking, you make more on audio.
All right. And so from what I'm hearing, basically the numbers on the books, right, which is a very different, and everybody makes the different numbers. But, and I'm sorry, we'll have to keep going because I lost my train of thought there listening to you, because I was like, wow. Oh, Amazon publishing. All right. So my question is, so you're self-published, right? Where do you go? How do you print your books? Are they printed on demand, or I print 100,000 copies of my book? How do you do that?
It's a great question. So it depends. You can do both, right? You can do either one. For paperbacks, you can do print on demand is usually the better call, although you can do what's called commercial offset printing, which is where you're printing in a huge batch and you get the big volume discounts. Hardcovers, you can actually do hardcovers print on demand now. Ingram does them, and they do a solid job. It's not bad. But if you want really beautiful, amazing hardcovers, you have to do commercial offset. And then you generally don't want to do commercial offset unless you're printing at least 2,000, give or take. I feel like, roughly speaking, commercial offset, you can print as low as 1,000, maybe even lower, but I think 1,000 is usually about the lowest you can go. That's maybe like $7 ish a copy at 1,000, and then at like 2,000 it goes down to like 4, right? And then at like 5,000 it goes down to like 2.5 or 3, and then at like 10,000 it's like $1.75 or something.
So
It's
basically,
really
you're almost
cheap.
paying. You might as well get 10,000 because you're going to be paying close to that. Yeah, that's the same with printing. Because I cut my teeth years ago in direct mail, and when we print that, it was like, okay, the cost of printing 1,000 is this, and the cost of 10,000 was this. Same thing. It was cheaper to print more and more and more than it was just because they already have it set up to run. It's a set, just run all the things through and pay for it up front. So
Yep, exactly.
Anything I missed?
No, I think you nailed it.
All right. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. And I really appreciate you being on today. But before we go, there's been a little theme through a lot of my podcasts. I found my wife, which shocked me. She started listening to them all. And she was like, you guys talk about that it's lonely at the top. The difference is, I think, and I don't know if you have the same thing, but it seems like you have with a partner, and the fact that you have the CEO, you guys it's not the same, but a lot of entrepreneurs go it alone. And when they get to the top, it's pretty lonely. Have you came across any of those issues through your?
Wow, of course, man. It's not that the problem is it's hard to find other people who can relate to your problems, right?
Right.
Because if you're an entrepreneur, a normal person who has a normal job, the thought in their mind is, well, you're rich. How could you have problems? I don't want to hear, oh, whiny rich entrepreneur, or whiny rich business owner. And you're like, no, asshole, I actually have more problems than you, but you can't talk about them to someone at that level just because they just don't even know how to relate to you. Even if they're a great person, super nice, they just don't get it, right? And so that's why I'm in a bunch of masterminds, it's sort of like Steve's group, right? Groups like that where you're around a bunch of other people who are doing similar things to you, and so they understand, oh yeah, you're right, I get that. I had someone do that in my company, and then it really is just about being around people who can share, who you can unburden yourself with, and for whom you can help them do the same. That's why people say it's lonely at the top, because it's hard. If you're an outlier, it's hard to meet other outliers. But
Right.
once you do, it's not lonely anymore. It's like, oh yeah, you get it. I get it too. It's like I got buddies that play in the NBA, right? Or a lot of them play professional sports, but I got more than a few in the NBA. And we're really good friends. We drink high-end expensive wine together. All this stuff. But there's a lot, whenever we talk about ball, Like I played basketball in college, right? Or in high school, and then almost played in college. So like I'm not good, but like I at least understand basketball, right?
Right.
But there's a level at which I don't get it. Like I can't talk about the league with them really because it's a different thing. It's just a whole, just like they don't understand what it means to run a business, you
Right.
know, or whatever. They just can't. They can't get it. It's a different world. It's not bad or good. It's just different. And so it's why ball players hang out together because they know what it's like to be in the league. I don't.
Right. And that's what I kind of want to get at, is because a lot of people don't realize that. And so as you've probably been coach, mentor, corner person, did you have all that,
Oh, yeah.
did it take a
Oh, of
while?
course.
Did it take a while in that first few years to realize what you needed, or how did you get there?
Oh, of course. Yes, I have all that. And yes, it took me a while to figure that out. Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you try and figure all this stuff out yourself, I mean, I guess you could do it. It's just, why would you make it so hard on yourself?
Well, I think a lot of people don't realize that it's out there and you can find it. If you look at my history, I don't have any background in anybody in my family that ran a business, did any of that kind of stuff. So there's nobody there. So I had to find people like a Steve Sims or some other things. I've had other huge mastermind groups I've been part of in my industry, but I find that my industry is not always the best place for me to get them from.
No,
Right.
because it's super insular, right? If I learned only from people who are in the book industry, I would know nothing.
Right.
I would be an idiot.
And that's
Never
why
learn only from your own industry.
And that's why I always go, I canceled all that stuff. And I'm going some complete outside of my industry. And I want to talk to people who know what they're doing in other industries so I can steal from them and recreate and go forward.
Yeah.
So, Tucker, I really appreciate you being on here today. Is there anything last nugget you want to throw out there for our listeners? Write your book.
If you're thinking about writing your book, there's no better time than now. Go to scribebookschool.com. It's totally free. You have no excuse. At least look at it. And I'm telling you, in 6 months or a year, you're going to regret that you didn't start today.
Yeah. And just so you know, I looked at it and I said, okay, I'm just going to hire him.
Well, you can do that too. I won't be mad.
No, it's amazing because going there, like I said before, figuring out what's involved, you're like, okay, it's better if I just pay for this and get the professionals to do it. It's always better to hire professionals than to go it alone and do it yourself, period.
Except for making babies. You want to do that with your wife.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even think about I didn't even go there. I have 5 kids. I didn't even think about that. So
right, of course, yeah.
That was easy. Those are of course. Yeah. All right. I really appreciate you being on here today. Thank you so much, Tucker.
Of course, man. Thanks, brother.